Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore belongs to the whole of India and indeed to all of mankind. Tagore's works have travelled all over the world and are read in different languages. It is thus fitting that we can celebrate literature and arts in his name.
शैल शिखरियां स्वागत करती, लहरें गाती ताल में, संस्कृतियों का इंद्रधनुष उतरा अपनी भोपाल में। आदरणीय देवी सज्जनों, साहित्य और संस्कृति से गुलजार विश्वरंग 2020 में आप सबका हम हार्दिक स्वागत करते हैं। मैं हूं विनय उपाध्याय और मेरे साथ हैं मेरी सहयोगी सुश्री शर्वानी बनर्जी। आदरणीय देवियों सज्जनों, रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर विश्वविद्यालय द्वारा परिकल्पित एक ऐसा जलसा जिसमें शब्द, रंग, दृश्य और ध्वनियों का एक सुंदर संसार बसता है। इसी संसार को बसाते हुए विश्वरंग ने परिकल्पना की गए साल, और इस बार ये दूसरा पादान हम तय कर रहे हैं अनेक सांस्कृतिक नवाचारों और प्रयोगधर्मिता के साथ, और कई सारी मुख्तलिफ किस्म की गतिविधियां हमने इसमें शामिल की हैं। शर्वानी,
As Vinay ji rightly said, that it is an amalgamation of art, culture and literature. And as we all know that literature is something which can express any of the feelings which we truly possess. विनय जी, जैसा कि अभी आपने कहा कि ये इतना खूबसूरत मंच है, और सबसे अच्छी बात यह है कि पहली बार 15 देश विश्वरंग के साथ जुड़े और भारतीय सभ्यता और उसकी संस्कृति को विश्वरंग के साथ सेलिब्रेट किया।
हाँ शर्वानी, ये हम सब लोगों के लिए बहुत ही प्रसन्नता का विषय है, खुशी का मौका है कि विश्वरंग के साथ वास्तव में इस बार सारी दुनिया के 16 से भी ज़्यादा मुल्क शामिल हो रहे हैं। और गर्व इस बात का है कि न केवल भारत बल्कि समंदर पार के जो 16 मुल्क हैं उन्होंने भी अपनी सरजमी पर विश्वरंग को आयोजित किया है। और विश्वरंग 2020, जैसा कि मैंने आपको बताया, कई सारे रंग और महक के साथ इस बार सारी दुनिया को अपनी बाहों में समेटने की कोशिश कर रहा है। और इस कोशिश में हम लोगों ने एक कदम आगे बढ़ाया अपनी एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण गतिविधि के माध्यम से, और उसे हमने नाम दिया विश्वरंग अंतर्राष्ट्रीय फिल्म समारोह। तो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय फिल्म समारोह में हमारी ये मंशा रही कि हम रजत पटल के उन सितारों को अपने साथ शामिल करें जो कि अपने कैमरे की नज़र से, अपनी नज़र से और अपने शब्दों की नज़र से, अपने दृश्यों की नज़र से, अपनी छवियों की नज़र से किस तरह से अपने वक्ती दौर को देखते हैं, और उन तमाम आहटों को समेटने की कोशिश हमने छोटी सी फिल्मों के माध्यम से की है। और ये छोटी फिल्मों का प्रदर्शन जब हमने मुकर्रर किया तो हमारे साथ 1, 2, 10 नहीं, सैकड़ों फिल्में अपनी प्रविष्टि के साथ शामिल हुई।
विश्वरंग इंटरनेशनल फिल्म फेस्टिवल एक स्पेशल अट्रैक्शन के रूप में उभर कर सामने आएगा, क्योंकि आजकल केवल महत्वपूर्ण फिल्म कलाकार ही नहीं बल्कि उभरते हुए फिल्मकार भी एक अलग तरह से, एक नए स्किल सेट के साथ कम वक्त में एक बहुत बड़ी बात को समेटने की जो कोशिश कर रहे हैं वो बहुत अच्छी तरह सामने उभर कर आई है, और उसे एक नई तरह की पहचान भी मिली है। और इस तरह के स्किल सेट को विश्वरंग के माध्यम से हम आप सभी तक पहुंचाना चाहते हैं।
शर्वानी, आपने ठीक कहा। और जब हम विश्वरंग की बात करते हैं, जब हम विश्वरंग अंतर्राष्ट्रीय फिल्म महोत्सव की बात करते हैं, नए स्किल की बात करते हैं, नए टैलेंट की बात करते हैं, नई तकनीक की जब बात करते हैं, तब यकायक हमारी यादों के पन्ने भी खुलते हैं। अब 100 बरस से भी ज़्यादा का हमारा भारतीय सिनेमा हो गया है, और अगर हम भारतीय सिनेमा के गुज़िश्ता दौर को याद करें तो हमें पहली बोलती फिल्म आलम आरा याद आती है। और आलम आरा से चलकर आज तक इस मुहाने तक हमारे पास पहुंचती हुई फिल्में बाकायदा ये कहती कि सिनेमा का दायरा बहुत सारा फैला है। उसके दामन में न जाने कितने सारे रंग और महकों को हम महफूज होता हुआ देखते हैं। और इस इसरार के साथ जब हम आज की फिल्मों को देखते हैं तो हमें लगता है कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें उसमें बदली, लेकिन नहीं बदला है तो सिर्फ इंसानी चेहरा, उसके जज्बात, यानी यहाँ यादें, बातें हैं, रिश्ते हैं, संवेदनाएं हैं, और हमारे वक्ती दौर के उस चौखट पर नए नए विषयों की ऐसी दस्तक है। ऐसे मुद्दों और बहस मुबाहिसों को हम सिनेमा के इस चौखट में दाखिल होता हुआ देखते हैं, जो कहीं न कहीं हमारे वक्त का एक बड़ा सांस्कृतिक हस्तक्षेप भी बनता है। और विश्वरंग जब इस तरह से अपनी पूरी की पूरी संरचना में हमसे मुतासिर होता है, हमको अपने आगोश में शामिल करता है, तब हम बहुत ही कौतूहल के साथ, बहुत ही जिज्ञासा के साथ और बहुत ही रुचि के साथ हमारे रजत पटल की ओर देखते हैं।
बिल्कुल, एक ज़माना था जब फ़िक्शन मूवीज़ का ही ज़माना हुआ करता था। किस तरह फ़िक्शन मूवीज़ से चलते चलते हम रियलिस्टिक सिनेमा तक पहुँचे, और आज के दौर में गंभीर से गंभीर विषय को नए युवा चेहरे अपनी रचनात्मकता से इतने बेहतरीन तरीके से प्रस्तुत करते हैं कि देख के उनका जो मैसेज है वो सीधे देखने वाले के दिल तक पहुँचता है।
ये सिनेमा जब हम सब तक पहुंचा, नए टैलेंट का, नए स्किल का, तो हमने ये बहुत गौर से देखा, गौर से हमने इस बात की पड़ताल की कि छोटे से दामन में किस तरह से बड़ी बात को रखा जा सकता है, किस तरह से एक बड़े संसार को हम छोटा होता हुआ देख सकते हैं, लेकिन वो सिर्फ अपने आकार में छोटा है, एहसास में छोटा नहीं है। इसलिए अगर समंदर को हथेली में अगर हम अंजोर कर देखना चाहें तो भी समंदर का एहसास लिया जा सकता है। कुछ ऐसे ही बड़े एहसास के साथ ये छोटी फिल्में हमारे सामने आती हैं। हम उम्मीद करते हैं दर्शकों कि आप हमारी विश्वरंग की और विश्वरंग के तहत इस अंतर्राष्ट्रीय फिल्म समारोह की गतिविधियों में लगातार हमसे जुड़ते रहेंगे और हमारे इस नए सिनेमा को भी जांचेंगे, परखेंगे, उसके साथ अपना एक रूहानी रिश्ता बनाएंगे।
रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर यूनिवर्सिटी की मेज़बानी में विश्वरंग 2020 का गुलदस्ता पूरी तरह तैयार हो चुका है। और इससे पहले कि हम आगे की गतिविधियों के बारे में बात करें, हम याद कर लेते हैं गुरुदेव रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर को।
रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर कला गुरु, भारतीय संस्कृति के उन्नायक, एक ऐसा प्रस्थान बिंदु वो भारत की संस्कृति में रहे जिसके बाद समूचे भारत को संस्कृति के क्षेत्र में सिरमौर होने का खिताब मिला। टैगोर की कला छवियां जब हमारे सामने होती हैं तो टैगोर हमें एक साहित्यकार के रूप में, एक चित्रकार के रूप में, एक रंगकर्मी के रूप में और एक संगीतकार के रूप में, एक शिक्षाकर्मी के रूप में हमें दिखाई देते हैं। टैगोर के गढ़े आदर्शों को आज भी नई नस्ल उसी शिद्दत से, उसी आदर और श्रद्धा के साथ याद करती है। आइए रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर का सुमिरन करें और इस मंगलाचरण का आनंद लें।
As Gurudev rightly said that music can fill the infinite between two hearts.
संगीत दो आत्माओं का मिलन है और इसी तरह से हमारी आत्मा की अंतर्लय को पुकारने का जतन हम मंगलाचरण के माध्यम से कर रहे हैं। हमारे साथ हैं हमारे समय के दो युवा फनकार सत्येंद्र सिंह सोलंकी और भास्कर। आइए सुनते हैं इनसे संतूर और बांसुरी की जुगलबंदी।
Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore belongs to the whole of India and indeed to all of mankind. Tagore's works have travelled all over the world and are read in different languages. It is thus fitting that we can celebrate literature and arts in his name.
जब हम साहित्य फिल्मों की बात करते हैं तो अनेक नामचीन शख्सियतें हमारे सामने आती हैं। हम याद करते हैं गिरीश कर्नाड को, हम याद करते हैं गुलजार को, शहरयार को, रस्किन बॉन्ड को, इंदिरा गोस्वामी को हम याद करते हैं। और इन तमाम शख्सियतों के साथ एक ऐसी साहित्य की यात्रा पर चल पड़ने का आमंत्रण हम अपने दर्शकों को देते हैं जो कहीं न कहीं इंसानी उसूलों के साथ हमारे आवाम की आवाज़ में आवाज़ मिलाती रहीं। इसी के साथ याद आती हैं कुछ विज्ञान फिल्में जो हमने विज्ञान संचार भारत सरकार के सहयोग से प्राप्त की हैं। आदरणीय देवियों सज्जनों, हमारी फिल्मोत्सव को हमने 3 श्रेणियों में विभाजित किया और इन 3 श्रेणियों में हमें सैकड़ों की तादाद में फिल्में हमारे नए फिल्मकारों से विशेष रूप से प्राप्त हुई हैं। सामान्य फिल्में, सामान्य विषयों पर बनने वाली फिल्में, वन्य जीवन और प्रकृति पर बनने वाली फिल्में और कला और संस्कृति विषय पर बनने वाली फिल्में, इन तीनों श्रेणियों की अनेक प्रविष्टियां हमको मिली और आप सबको आने वाले 4 दिनों तक लगातार इन फिल्मों के प्रदर्शन का आनंद हम साझा करना चाहेंगे।
जैसा कि विनय जी ने बताया कि साहित्यिक फिल्म स्क्रीनिंग में बहुत सारे लेजेंड्स पर बनी डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज देखने वाले हैं जो हमें साहित्य अकादमी द्वारा प्राप्त हुई हैं। आज हम पहले दिन देखने जा रहे हैं कन्नड़ भाषा में बनी फिल्म गिरीश कर्नाड। इन्हीं लेजेंड के ऊपर ये फिल्म बनाई है के.एम. चैतन्य ने, जिन्होंने गिरीश कर्नाड के जीवन को बहुत ही सुंदर तरीके से प्रस्तुत किया है। इसी कड़ी में हम अगली फिल्म देखेंगे इंदिरा गोस्वामी, जो कि एक बहुत बड़ी असमिया लेखिका रही हैं। इन पर यह फिल्म बनाई है जाने माने निर्देशक जहनु बरुआ ने। तो चलते हैं फिल्म की ओर।
ನಾನು 16-17 ವರ್ಷದವನಿರುವಾಗ ಈ ಒಂದು ಹುಚ್ಚು ಹಿಡಿತು ನನಗೆ. ಅದಂತಂದರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಚಿತ್ರಗಳನ್ನು ಬಿಡಿಸಿ, ಇದು ಟಿ.ಎಸ್. ಎಲಿಯಟ್ ಅಂದಿದ್ದು, ಇದನ್ನು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ದೆ. ಅವ್ರ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಆಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ ಅದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಆಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ ಮಾಡಿಸಿ ತಿರುಗಿ ತಗೋತಿದ್ದೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಸಾಧಾರಣ 17-18ನೇ ವಯಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಶಾನ್ ಒಕೀಜಿ ಅಂತ ಒಬ್ಬ ಐರಿಷ್ ಪ್ಲೇ ರೈಟಿಗೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ಟೆ. ಅವರು ತಿರುಗಿ ಕಳಿಸಿ, ಯಾಕೆ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ನೀನು ಟೈಮ್ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಆಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊತಾ, ಅದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ನೀವು ಉಳಿದವ್ರು ನೀನು ಆಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ ತೊಗೊಳೋಂಗೆ ಮಾಡು ಅಂತ ಬರೆದ್ರು. ನನಗೆ ಹೌದು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಾನು ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟೆ. ಅದು
This is a familiar sight to many in Bangalore. Girish Karnad sets out on his morning walk. Karnad has traversed many paths as actor, director, thinker, and administrator, leaving his unique footprint in many fields. His most significant contribution has been to theatre. Karnad is ranked among the greatest playwrights in Indian literary history.
It was only when I was 16 that I realized a very important thing about my family, which was that my mother was a child widow and that she had a son and that she had become a nurse and met my father and got remarried again, and that we were children of her second marriage. But we were always brought up to believe that our eldest brother, Bhalchand, was our sibling. We were never told that he was a half-brother. My mother had a very strong influence on me, on all of us, for two reasons. One thing, because she had struggled, she was very liberal, sexually. Liberal in the way she helped widows, the way she brought up women. I remember that when I was about 35 and so on, a woman who was a cook in our house, wrote me a love letter saying, you know, I love you, you know, what can I do, and so on and so on. So I put it in my drawer and went away to shoot, and when I came back there was no letter. So I said to my mother, you know, there was a letter, I had a letter here, I had put it here, it has disappeared, what's to be done? So she said, oh, you mean that letter written by that girl? Yes, at that age, all girls feel like that. Why are you keeping that letter? Are you going to blackmail her? And I have torn it up. She said. That was the end of that. She and my father were both great theatre enthusiasts. They had seen in Maharashtra, you know, because my father travelled around Maharashtra, plays by Balagandhar, plays by Kishore Bhole, you know, Marathi theatre. They loved Marathi theatre. Both of them used to see. I see them, and I grew up with them telling me how glorious theatre was. My father was in government service, and he retired in 1942-43 from Pune. But the war was on, so he was given an extension. And with an extension, he had to go to Sirsi, which was then considered a malarial post. Because Sirsi had no electricity. It was in the backwoods, it was in the jungles. And one used to see Yakshagana, or one used to see company nataks and occasionally a film. But otherwise, the only entertainment was stories. You know, it was a world full of stories. And I learnt all my Puranas, all my Itihasa from those few years in Sirsi. Whatever I learnt about theatre, I imbibed from the Havya community, I think. From being with them, from doing plays with them, from acting with them, seeing, going to Yakshagana with them, the whole lot. This is Saraswatpur. My father, when he came to Dharwad in 1952, he came and took a house here. And since then, I've had a very close connection with Saraswatpur. When we came here in 1952, there were 51 Saraswat houses with Saraswat families and 51 outhouses with Saraswat families. So this whole area was a kind of prosperous Saraswat ghetto. The Saraswats were and are an educated community. Which was fortunate for me, and they believed, although they all worked under the British, they believed that India should have independence, that Indians should lead themselves, and that there was need for social reform. Mahatma Gandhi came here, for instance. He lived in this house. I own this house today, but you know, and I'm very proud that Mahatma Gandhi slept in one of the rooms here. Dr. Ambedkar came here, and he stayed in another house, that kind of stuff. And Dharwad was considered the cultural capital of North Karnataka. This is the Basel Mission School. I was a student here for 2 years after I came to Dharwad, and from here I went on to Kannada College. A great school. There are a lot of buildings here now, inevitably. I mean, houses are being built. You can see there that a lot of new houses have come. But when I used to come here in 1957, that was exactly 50 years ago, there was nothing here except the Someshwara temple and the tank. Unforgettable moments in my life. This is the Someshwara temple. I mean, it's quite old actually, and people believe that it was built by Jakanacharya, which shows how old it is, which means they don't know who built it. And this is the temple tank. I learnt my swimming here. I used to come here at 5:36 in the morning, often without telling my father, who used to be very worried. Bendre has a famous poem, Vantanna Sanna Samara. Bantanna Sanna Somara, Kanabekanna Someshwara. The festival of Sanna Somara has come and we must now see Someshwara. And this is the Someshwara temple. To anyone interested in literature, whether he was a resident of Dharwar or a visitor to Dharwar, a visit to Bendre's house was a must. In those days, of course, no one took any appointment. We just turned up and Bendre never minded it. Bendre has a poem, Baro Sadhana Kerige, come to Sadhana Keri. That was the area in which he lived, and he welcomed us. Then we would come and he would talk to us for half an hour, 45 minutes. And at the end of it, he would call his son and he would say, Bala Sakretaro. Bala would bring sugar, we would be given sugar, which was a sign of saying goodbye. And then we would go back feeling utterly rejuvenated by this exposure to Bendre's genius. This is Karnataka College. I was here for 4 years, from 1954 to 1958. I did my BA here with mathematics. For all those 4 years, I had Professor V.K. Gokak as the principal. He was a marvelous principal, a marvelous teacher. So to be here was really an intellectual honor, a pleasure. In those days, it was considered fashionable among students of the college to indulge in literary creativity, to write poems, to write essays, to write short stories and so on. It may be that people like V.K. Gokak themselves were writers and therefore inspired the people. But among those who were with me, the person who influenced my life most was Kirtinath Kurtkote. He was much older than me. I was about 18 and he was about 30. The reason was that he had not been unable to continue his education after he did his BA. He did his BA at about 20, then he taught in Gadag because he had no money, and he came to Dharwar when he was around 28 and stayed with G.B. Joshi and continued his education. And this was the one great advantage I had. Through him, I got to know G.B. Joshi. I got to enter Manohar Granthmala, which was a great honor in those days. This is Subhash Road. And in Dharwar, when I was young, Marathi was used as much as Kannada. I mean, it had the same kind of currency. And we spoke both the languages in the marketplace here, actually. And Subhash Road was the road where everyone came for a walk in the evening, particularly college students. The boys came and the girls came and we all walked pretending not to look at each other, but of course looking at each other. Most important to me, the most important point in Subhash Road was Manohar Granthmala. Here, they were my publishers. They made me the writer that I am today. YN Krishnamurthy, who was the editor of Prajavani and then the editor of Kannada Prabha, used to say that Manohar Granthmala taught Kannada readers to read Kannada literature. In the 1930s, when there was hardly any Kannada literature, Manohar Granthmala took the lead in publishing good literature. They created whole body of readers for Kannada literature and published writers like Ernakru, like Gokak, and made modern literature possible. You see, Manohar Granthmala was my other home in Dharwar. One home was my own home, where my parents were there, but I always used to come so that I could spend time here with Kirti and GB, because I learnt my language here. I learnt my literature here. I learnt about Sanskrit drama here. I mean, the amount I've learnt is quite extraordinary. Kirti's conversation was like a machine gun fire, Bright ideas used to keep on coming from all directions, and if you're there, you tried quickly to grab an idea, see what you could do with it. Another man whom I met here was A.K. Ramanujan, who would come here. Then there were people like Shankar Mukashi Punekar, and Bendre used to come here, and this was a great crucible for ideas, a very exciting place to be in, and I benefited enormously from it. I did my BA here with mathematics. Actually, I had no love for mathematics. In fact, I hated the subject. But then I was dying to go abroad. In fact, in that generation, everyone wanted to go abroad. Probably they still do. And there was no way my father could send me, because he didn't have that means to do so. So to go abroad, I had to get a scholarship. To get a scholarship, I had to get a first class. And I decided that by taking Kannada or history or English, I could not make sure that I would get a first class. The only way I could make absolutely sure that I would get a first class was by studying mathematics. So I took mathematics, I got my first class, I stood first to the university, and I got the Rhodes Scholarship. So in a way, my the idea of taking mathematics bore fruit. But now when I look back, I think it was a very good idea, because mathematics taught me a discipline. Mathematics gives you a rigor. It lets you think of various factors in a very logical fashion. And if you want to be a playwright, that kind of training is immensely useful. But if I took the Rhodes Scholarship, in those days, you couldn't fly. You had to take a ship. I had to go by 3 weeks. My father didn't have enough money to pay me back, so I would come back after 3 years. So there was chaos at home. Will he stay there? Will he marry a white woman? And so on and so on. And the parents were demanding, no, you come back to India. And I felt these people are making demands on me. All that seemed suddenly coming to life in the story of Yayati and his demands on Puru. You sacrifice your youth for me, and so on. And suddenly the whole thing poured out as a play.
ನೀನು ಅವಳ ಅಭಿಮಾನವನ್ನು ಕೆಣಕಿದೆ. ಈಗ ಅವಳಿಗೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ದಂಶದಲ್ಲೂ ತನ್ನ ವಿಜಯದ ಅನುಭವವಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಹಿಂಸೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ತನ್ನ ಪರಾಕ್ರಮದ ಸಂವೇದನೆಯಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ನಾನು ಈ ಆಟವನ್ನು ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆಂದು ಬಂದೆ. ಆದರೆ ನಾನು ಈ ಆಟದಲ್ಲಿಯ ಆಟಿಗೆ ಎಂಬುದು ಈಗ ಗಮನಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂತು ನೋಡು.
It surprised me completely, for one thing, because I didn't know that I was so closely related to our myths, although I was, because of Circe, thanks to Circe, it had imbibed in me. That I didn't know. Secondly, I wanted to be an English poet. I wanted to go abroad and be with T.S. Eliot and Auden and so on, win the Nobel Prize, that kind of thing. And the third thing is I wanted to be a poet, not a playwright. And suddenly this play just poured out like that. It was pouring out. I was writing it down in Kannada. And I was like a stenotypist.
ನೀವು ನನ್ನ ಬಲಗೈಯನ್ನು ಹಿಡಿದಿದ್ದೀರಿ. ನಾನು ಕೇವಲ ದಾಸಿ.
Before leaving for England, I went to Manohar Granthmala and I gave him the G.B. Joshi, the play. And I said, here I have a play, can you read it and let me know? And he, of course, gracious in a place, said, I'll take it home, read it. After 4 or 5 days, I came back and said, have you read it? And he returned it to me and said, yes, I've read it. That our Dasya monologue, that maid's monologue in the last act, that's very touching, he said. That's it. That was the comment on the whole play. Now, the Dasya's monologue is in the corner of the play, not the main theme at all. So I assumed that, well, that's it. That's the end of the matter. My playwriting ends. So I left for England. In Oxford, there's no other world. What happens outside doesn't matter. You are a student, and that is it. You react to each other. You meet writers who are potential writers, politicians who are potential politicians. I really enjoyed those 3 years enormously. And of course, the Oxford Union, the fact I became a president of the Oxford Union, it took some trouble, was a great experience, because the Oxford Union is open to London, Parliament. Politicians come. People like Randolph Churchill, people like Sir Cyril Connolly, people like Richard Crossman, they all came, spoke, and I got to know them. And I got to know how India is seen by outside politicians, by intellectuals and so on. When I was at Oxford, in my first term sometime, I got a letter from Kirtinath Kutkoti. And he said, I've just talked to G.B. Joshi. G.B. Joshi says he read your play and he told me what you've done with it, and I think it's very exciting, the possibilities. So please send me the script. But he also made a clause. He said, I hope you are not like Eugene O'Neill. Eugene O'Neill uses all these myths for Freudian purposes. And I said, oh my God, because I was very influenced by Eugene O'Neill also. I loved him. So anyway, I rewrote Yayati, sent it to Manohar Granthmala. I got a letter saying, we like it, we'll publish it. It was published, and then once it was published, it got all kinds of response. It got very good response. I knew at that moment, when Yayati got published, that I was coming back. I was not staying in England anymore. I didn't want to be an English poet. I wanted to be in Kannada. While writing on drama, Kirtinath Kutkoti in one place said that we don't have any plays which treat history as contemporary. And I said, why not? Why not? I mean, I needed a subject and I didn't. So I said, let me write a historical subject. Took out a book of history and started with Mohenjo-daro and read the history book, write down Mohenjo-daro, the Guptas and Mauryas, and write down. And when I came to 13th century, I came across the story of Tughlaq. And I said, this is it, marvelous. I've found the subject. Again, with Tughlaq, it was not just that he was a mad king, a person who took the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, but he was a king who banned public prayer in his kingdom for 5 years. Now, think of a sultan banning public prayers. He was going against the Holy Quran, he was going against his priests. Why should he have done it?
ನನಗೆ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮತೆ ಬೇಕು, ಪ್ರಗತಿ ಬೇಕು, ತರ್ಕ ಶುದ್ಧ ನ್ಯಾಯ ಬೇಕು. ಶಾಂತಿ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಸಾಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಜೀವ ಕಳೆ ಬೇಕು.
So when I was going to Oxford, I was writing Yayati. On the way back from Oxford, I was writing Tughlaq. So I had the first draft ready as I reached Bombay. Tughlaq turned me into a kind of all-India figure. It was done in Bombay by Alek Padamsee, it was done by Alkazi there, it was done in Marathi by Arvind Deshpande, it was done in Bengali by Shambhu Mitra. Mention it, I mean, here by Simha. I must say that many things in my plays came from these casual conversations. You know, one day Karant and I were sitting and I was telling him the story of transposed heads, Thomas Mann's story, and said, this will make a marvelous film, heads changing and so on. ಯಾಕ್ರಿ ಫಿಲ್ಮ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ನಾಟಕ ಆಗುತ್ತದೋ ಮಾಸ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಅಂಡ್ ಐ ಸೆಡ್ ಕ್ವೈಟ್ ರೈಟ್, ಇಸ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ರೈಟ್. ಸೊ ಐ ರೋಟ್ ಹೈವದನ.
ಆದರೆ ಚಿಕ್ಕಂದಿನ ಚುರುಕುತನ ಈಗ ಹೇಗೆ ಬರಬೇಕು? ಕಪಿಲ, ನಮ್ಮಿಬ್ಬರಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕತ್ತಿ ಯುದ್ಧ ಮಾಡಬಲ್ಲರು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಈಗ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ನನಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು.
Ramanujan arranged for me to come to Chicago as a Fulbright scholar. At that time, there was also a condition that I should write a play, a fresh play, for the students of Chicago University, English department. And then Ramanujan told me the story of, two stories he told me. One which I turned into a film called Chellavi, and then he told me the story of Nagamandala, and I wrote it out. I just wrote it for the undergraduates. But this is what I mean. A play, writing a play is like having a child, you know. You can say this is the future I want for it, but they don't listen to you. They just go off on their own. Nagamandala has become a hugely successful play.
কিন্তু
কি কিন্তু?
না না কিছু না।
ও, তোমার সব কথায় তো কিন্তু কিন্তু কিসের, কি হয়েছে বলো না?
তুমি তো ওকে কালকে পাহারা দেওয়ার জন্য নিয়ে এলে।
When you're building a house, you say this is where the kitchen will come, this is where the gate will come, this is where the main road is, this is where dust will come, and so on. A play has to be planned like that. I work, chip and chisel, because I think on stage, a little look like that can suggest so much. The play that I really wanted to write, which I worked on at Chicago, did a lot of work, was Taladanda and Agnimat Malai. You know, because there were all these sociologists, professors. You could discuss with them Taladanda, what happened in Taladanda, what was the caste system. At that time, the Mandir and Masjid thing was taking place here. You know, on one side, the Mandir people saying Hinduism is one and we must be saved. And the Masjid, you know, the Masjid episode, Babri Masjid, and also the, you know, the Mandal Commission report, all that was happening. What is Hinduism, what's not Hinduism. And I felt, God, we have not changed at all. We have remained the same for the last 1,000 years, because these are the issues that Basavanna handled.
What will the John Company gain in land and gold and silver by harming my sons? There is no danger of that. The danger is they will teach my children their language, English. A language in which it is possible to consider boys of 7 and 8 as hostages of war.
Well, I directed one play of mine, only one, and that's Vadakal Bimba. And that is because I thought if I didn't direct it, no one will know what the form is. You know, there's an image and there's the real person, and the real person talks to the image. And everyone said, image? What image? Some other actress will come there. I said, no. It has to be an image. So ultimately, me and Chaitanya and we all sat together and, you know, we did it.
2 ವಾರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ 1.5 ಲಕ್ಷ ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ಬರವಣಿಗೆ, ದಿನಕ್ಕೆ 10,000 ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ರಚನೆ. ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ನಿನಾದ. ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ತಡಸಲು ಬಿಡದೆ
ನಿಲ್ಸು, ಸಾಕು ಸುಮ್ಮನಿರು. ಒಪ್ಕೋತೀನಿ, ನಾನಾ ಕಾದಂಬರಿ ಬರೀಲಿಲ್ಲ, ನನ್ನ ತಂಗಿ ಬರೆದಳು.
In 1969, Karnad wrote the screenplay of Samskara based on a novel by U.R. Ananthamurthy, yet another prominent Kannada writer. Karnad even donned the lead role in the film. It was his first foray into the world of cinema. Vamshavruksha was his debut as a film director along with B.V. Karand. Since then, he has directed some of the most memorable films in Kannada, including Kadu, Vandanondu Kaladalli, Tabbaliyu Neenade Magane, and Kannuru Hegadati. Working alongside filmmakers like Satyajit Ray, Shyam Benegal, and Govind Nihalani, Girish Karnad made his presence felt in the Hindi film industry as well.
आप कौन है?
He has directed films in Hindi like Utsav, Cheluvi, and Voghar. Most importantly, some of the most reputed talents in Indian cinema first entered films under Girish Karnad. The Kannada superstar Vishnuvardhan made his debut in Girish Karnad's Vamshavruksha.
You idiot! Matteno, avargotra kannira hakaka?
Karnad even introduced the immensely talented actor-director Shankar Nag in the film Vandanondu Kaladalli. Actors Amrish Puri, Om Puri, Shekhar Suman, Sonali Kulkarni, cinematographer Rajiv Menon, art director Sabu Cyril, all first entered cinema under Karnad's wing. Girish Karnad has also played an important role in shaping the cultural policy of India. He has built and nurtured several institutions of repute, including the Karnataka Natak Academy, the Sangeet Natak Academy, the Film and Television Institute of India, and the Nehru Centre in London. And his contributions have been recognized across India and the world. He has been conferred with reputed honours like the Kalidas Samman, Gubbi Veeran Award for Lifetime Achievement in Kannada Theatre, Swarna Kamal, Central Sahitya Academy Award, Padma Shri, and Padma Bhushan. Girish Karnad has been conferred with the most important literary honour in India, the Jnanpith, for his contribution as playwright. Karnad's wife, Saraswati Ganapati, is a doctor and social activist. She works to empower women in rural Karnataka. Karnad has two children, Raghu Amai and Radha Shalmali.
Close to the temple Someshwara is the source of the river Shalmali. This is it, Shalmala Nadi, she's called. And when my daughter was born, I said to my wife, why call her after Ganga, Yamuna, Narmada, Saraswati, rivers which are far away? We should call her after a river which is next door to us. And Saraswatpur, where I was brought up, is just next door here. And Someshwara is there. And in the poem, Sanna Swamara, which I quoted while we were in Someshwara, there are these lines of Bendre's which are very famous. Shalmali, Sanna Bali, Kiviyolaga, Talewali, Gari Gari Banadaga Adagi. ಗಂಗಾ ಹೊಳೆಯಾಗಿ ಸಾಗರ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸಾಗರಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹೊರಟಾಳ ಗೋಕರ್ಣ ಕಳಿಗಿ ಬೂರಲ ದೀಪಮಾಲಿ ನಂದಿಸಿ ಸಜ್ಜಿಸಾಲಿ ಗತ್ತಿನ ಸಪ್ಪುಳಿಲ್ಲದ ನಡಿ. When my mother was expecting me, when she was 2 months pregnant, probably 2 or 3 months pregnant, she decided that she didn't want me. She didn't want to have another child. She already had 3. So she persuaded my father to take her to a person, to a doctor, to have an abortion. A doctor called Dr. Madhumalati Gune, and I think I shall forever be grateful to this Dr. Madhumalati Gune, because that day Dr. Madhumalati Gune didn't come to her clinic. So my mother waited half a day and then she got bored and they came home. And so my mother said, we had you, otherwise we would have got rid of you. And I was so shocked, the whole notion that there would be this world without me. I mean, you know, all blank. I felt completely blank, and my first reaction was to say, but then you have my younger sister, how can you have my younger sister if you wanted to get rid of me? And my mother said, oh, by that time I had lost interest, in the whole thing. So we had a younger sister. But I tell you that when that revelation came, for about 5 minutes, the whole notion that the world could exist and I could not be there just completely stunned me. And recently I told this story to my children and they were equally stunned. They said, what, the whole world would have been there and we wouldn't have been there. So the point is that it was a traumatic experience when I think I genuinely experienced the absurdity of life.
I have grown up on your bank, my red river. I have slept with you in the moonlit night. You have laid my bed with those white flowers. In the stormy night, in fury, I saw you eating the raw flesh of human corpse. Still you are my dear red river. I count your hidden treasures, those weapons of Ghiyasuddin, Juzbek, and 100 cannons of Mir Jumula. To protect me, you sang the lullaby. Oh, my red river, you flow like a blood that flows in my vein. My red river, you rip open my heart, and I don't know where you disappear inside.
An important part of Indira Goswami's childhood and youth were spent simply gazing at the Brahmaputra, more like a sea in its creative and destructive powers, yet stunning in visual beauty and poetic in the signification of eternity. The mind of any artist living here is moulded by the river, and so it was with Indira's sensibility. Indira Goswami chose to express herself in the idiom of narrative writing in the Assamese language. In her novels, sensory images are dense, so tactile, visual, and auditory that the text comes to life in pictures, touch, sound, smell, and even taste. She filters her ideas through her sensory perception. She is gifted with the talent to translate experience into words. Tantric traditions hold sway in parts of Kamrup. As a young girl, Indira was taken to the Vagala temple at Kamakhya, and a goat was sacrificed to propitiate the goddess, because when she was a child, an astrologer had said that her stars were so disastrously placed that it would be preferable that she be cut into pieces and thrown into the Brahmaputra.
You know, I never used to like sacrifice. When my mother was told that my planets are so bad, black goat has to be sacrificed in the temple of Bagala. Bagala is another manifestation of Kamakhya. So I was taken there, and as soon as I saw it is sacrificed, my mind totally thing out from the Devi and everybody. Even in our house in South Kamrup, and there were very big feasts used to take place where several goats were killed. You know, they used to dig a pit and put the head of the goat there and cover it with, in a very cruel way. I felt so bad that I started weeping. Then that red color, you know, that remained embedded in my heart for quite a long time. And always I used to feel that the tikka which was put on my forehead And that part, some kind of pain I used to feel for a long time.
Ever since, Indira has campaigned against animal sacrifice at Kamakhya. She is appalled by cruelty to animals in general, and the red blood of the sacrifice goat in her memory seems to symbolize her position as a writer and as a human being. Indira, or Mamuni as she is affectionately known, developed these strong convictions when she grew up in Assam. Her very fine book on the 1984 anti-Sikh riots in Delhi, which she witnessed at first hand, is called Pages Stained with Blood. Here it was human, not animal blood that she saw spilt on the streets. A pivotal character in the book is a Sikh called Singh, an auto rickshaw driver and a friend who vanished after the riots.
It's a true character. In fact, many characters are true character here. Now, Santoor Singh, when I first joined the university, I had no car at that time, so Santoor Singh used to, take me in his three-wheeler. He died in the riot. Riot means he disappeared totally. Now, I have described his, about him and how he died into 2 paragraphs, and they are 1984 চনৰ 13 নৱেম্বৰ মঙ্গলবাৰ পুৱা মানুহৰ হৈ হাল্লা আৰু চিঞৰ বাখৰত বিছনাৰ পৰা খৰমৰকৈ উঠি বহিলোঁ। বাহিৰলৈ ওলাই আহি দেখিলোঁ ইতিমধ্যে চটত শুই থকা কাইকাছ তললৈ নামি আহিছে। ধপ ধপ শব্দ কৰি বিল্ডিঙৰ অনেক মানুহ তললৈ নামি আহিল। মই উধাটো খাই তলৰ গোল চক্ৰলৈ চালোঁ। তলৰ গোল চক্ৰত লোকাৰণ্য হৈ পৰিছে। পুলিচৰ গাড়ী এখন মানুহৰ ভিৰৰ মাজত পুত গৈ আছে। মানুহৰ চিঞৰ বাখৰ স্পষ্ট কাণত পৰি লাশ পৰি আছে। মই তললৈ হেফাই ফুফাই নামি আহিলোঁ। বেজীৰ দোকানৰ ওচৰত এটা আৱাজ শুনিলোঁ, मैडम लौट जाइए, आप देखा नहीं पाओगी, उन्होंने कसाई को भी माफ़ किया, लेकिन यहाँ क्यों फेंक गया? अरे भाई, जगह जगह लाश मिला है। हठाৎ এটা আৱাজ লোহাৰ ত্ৰিশূলৰ দৰে বুকুৰ মাজত মোৰ সোমাই পৰিল। यह संतोष सिंह की लाश है। संतोष सिंह की लाश ভৰিৰ তলৰ পৃথিৱীখন যেন বহু দূৰলৈ আঁতৰি গ'ল। কাইকাছে মোৰ বাহুত ধৰি ওপৰলৈ লৈ আহিল। মই আৰু আগুৱাই যাব নোৱাৰিলোঁ।
Images stained in color, like the red of violence, shape her memory and her writing. Earlier, when Indira went to do research for her doctorate at Vrindavan, she describes in vivid colors the appalling condition of widows in that city of God.
My mother was not at all happy to send me to Vrindavan, and the place which they think that it is a discarded place. It is for the widows who were discarded. People will think that you have gone there because you are a widow. But then gradually what happened, I went, I liked the place so much, I have written one of my important novels.
One of Indira's best-known novels, Neelkanthi Braj, is based on the lives of these widows. Writers and critics have described the book as the finest documentation on Hindu widows written in an Indian language. What is emphasized in the book is the way women, young and old, were discouraged from all sensory feeling in order that they remain celibate.
The very day when I reached Vrindavan, I wanted to come back. I thought I cannot stay here. It is not possible. I have to go back. But then, next day in the morning, and after coming back from the Institute of Oriental Philosophy, everything became so natural, so easy, and everything became so bright all of a sudden that agony for which I wanted to go back was no more. This is a great experience for me, and Vrindavan gave me ample of wisdom.
This ability to distance herself from her subject and yet be powerfully sensuous in its literary creation can only come from deep and painful personal experience. Indira's husband, Madhavan Raisam, was an engineer who built bridges. He worked on the Brahmaputra bridge, which is when she met him, and her memories of their marriage defines some of the visual imagery in her writing. She travelled with him to Kutch in Gujarat and to Kashmir. Her life in difficult terrain on location was invaluable for a writer. She saw at first hand the exploitation of workers at the construction sites where her husband worked, and the experiences resulted directly in at least 3 important novels: The Stream of Chenab, Ahiran, and The Rusted Sword, a novel which won her the Sahitya Academy Award.
Well, that was the happiest part of my life when I stayed with my husband in Saurashtra, Kutch, for the first time. Then I went to Kashmir. And as a person, I have never met anyone like Madhu before. He had a great personality. He had enough knowledge. Besides being an engineer, he used to love literature. All these are embedded in me, and suddenly losing him, it was something which till now I could not cope with. So automatically pain becomes subject of your writing. So I wrote the Nilkanthi Braj, the widows of Vrindavan. I saw their terrific life, and my heroine there is myself only, Sodamini. I have molded my feeling, I have given her my own feeling when I lost my husband, what happens to me, how I, suddenly breaking out from that life, what kind of mental agony I suffered. Everything I have poured out in her.
As a child, Indira was always intensely curious, totally absorbed in anything she was exposed to. So when she was sent to Pine Mount School in Shillong, it was a new adventure. For a family steeped in the Brahminical tradition of Assam, the convent school ambience of Pine Mount was a bit of a culture shock. But for Indira, it was a whole new world, and she became fascinated with the image of Christ.
My father used to tell me that you have to learn Bible. You have to enhance your knowledge. So I attended the classes. I used to get very good marks, and I felt totally with Christ. And one day I told my father that I was very young, about 10, 11 or so. And I told my father that I want to become a Christian. And he said that, not now. You have to read other scriptures also. You have to read Quran, Muslims' great holy book. And so about Hinduism, you don't know anything. You are very young. So later on, if you feel that you like Christianity, you will. But not now. So I still remember that conversation with my father because of Christ, whom I liked him. He sacrificed his life. Even that part where his clothes, blood-stained clothes, were taken out by his enemy, that is also blood.
It is easy to see how symbolism becomes a vital literary device when used creatively by a writer like Indira Goswami. The characters she creates innately possess notions like sacrifice. For example, the Baptist missionary Mark Sahib, an important character in Indira's best-known novel, The Moth-Eaten Howdah of a Tusker, is a person who sacrifices. Similarly, the widows of Vrindavan and the victims of the anti-Sikh riots also sacrifice their lives. Then later in the novel, other literary symbols occur, like that of decadence and decay. The book is about a Satara, an Assamese institution that was originally social and religious, but over time became feudal and oppressive, particularly towards widows. Just as the howdah of an elephant might look grand from outside but was moth-eaten from within, so the Satara looked triumphant from without but was actually in a state of decay.
Datal hatir uyakwa howdah. It gives you a more coherent, experience of reality. Mangalacharan Goswami, she has this kind of visual and sensuous richness of detail because she immerses herself in the experiences that she presents to us. And such is the intensity of her sensuous awareness that the things lose their inertness, their ordinariness. They become imaginative, symbolic visions in themselves.
7, 2, 7, 8, 8, 5, 7, 9.
The personality of Indira Goswami is an open book, or perhaps an open wall, and her mind, her literary and intellectual preferences are eclectic. When Indira went to do her PhD on the Ramayana in Vrindavan, the symbolism associated with Christ transferred itself into the symbolism of Lord Rama. Today, Dr. Goswami is an authority on interpolations that have taken place over the centuries on the text of the Ramayana.
You'll be surprised to know Ramayana never interested me for several reasons, because of there are many points which in a very young age I didn't like Sambuk Bad. Sambuk is a lower caste fellow who was not allowed to study Veda. That's why Rama, he killed him. Then this disfigurement of Surpanakha, that point I didn't like. Banishment of Sita, I didn't like. I met Father Kamil Bulke. He is a very well-known scholar on Ramayana. He is a Jesuit father, hail from Belgium. Then what happened, Father taught me very thoroughly about the interpolations. Then he said, see, Indira, you don't like these episodes, but these are all interpolated. These are not written by Valmiki. Sambuk Bad is later interpolated. It exists only in Dakshinatya edition, not in Gauriya or Paschimottarya. So again, this banishment of Sita, it was not written by Valmiki at all. It is later interpolations. You find out real Valmiki, that will be your study.
An important part of the technique of a novelist is to establish a point of view from which the story is told. Perhaps this method of a writer helps Indira to investigate the various interpolations in the many versions of the Ramayana. For instance, the vast difference between the Madhav Kandali and Tulsidas versions.
Madhav Kandali has shown Rama as a human being. He weeps when he thinks that he will have to leave Sita and go for exile. He weeps saying that Suragana Munira Gandharvara Manohare Beho dekhi kimote manuse monodhare. Jibante mritak moi tukapori horu gole khila bandhiya hagore jhampo koru. Sita, I feel like when I think about leaving you, I feel like tying a stone on my neck and drowning myself in the ocean. He is so much, he has come down to that level of the incarnation of Vishnu to human being. Even Sita, she was so much a human being. She is not a mother earth or incarnation of Lakshmi. She even says that Sampaka kulika jeno muhur kolebor lundi ghundi asilaha jeheno bhramor jebe asi bikokito hoilo phulo phol upobhogo erikeno karaha nispol. Oh Rama, you are enjoying my body like a Brahmar. Now it is blooming and you are leaving me. Now no goddess will say such a thing. On the other hand, if I compare this thing with Tulsidas, there is a vast difference. Tulsi was, always alert that he is picturing the incarnation of Vishnu, not even Vishnu, Param Brahma. So even to describe Sita, who is Mahalakshmi, he was hesitant, he felt delicate, and that's why he said, Jagadamba, Rupa Guna Anupama, Upama Muhe Lagoi Jutari. Koi patotori videha kumari. All their similes have become stale. With what simile I'll compare the Mother Earth? So he was conscious every moment. But there was difference between the two Ramayanas.
Indira Goswami is one of the most respected intellectuals associated with Delhi University, at which academic institution she has spent many of the most fruitful years of her life. Clearly, she is not just a wonderfully skillful novelist, but a fine researcher, original thinker, and gifted teacher and academic.
Now, we know Mamanirasam Goswami as a novelist, but you should not forget that she is also an equally gifted short story writer. There too, she is very bold in unfolding her themes, just as in her novels. And at the same time, she is very much concerned with the art of the short story. Now, it is this fusion of art as well as of life that raised her short story into the level of the very best short stories of India.
In a short story called The Offspring, Indira tells of a wealthy village man called Pitambar who lives with an invalid wife. He has a relationship with the widow of a priest of the Satara, a woman called Damayanti, in order to get a son and legal heir. But when Damayanti gets pregnant, she aborts and buries the fetus. However, Pitambar is so obsessed with an heir, he goes to her garden and starts digging for his child. You can almost hear the digging. So consciously does Indira use sound as a literary device.
Damayantiye bhoyot thok thok ke kopibo dhorile. Ki kore manutue? Atah paribo niki tai baru? Tai ghorote ki kando ghotise? Mahajan nai kunu bhrukkep nai. Hutur. Mahajan kyo khandisa? Pitambar Mahajane khirikir pine ebar uboti sale kintu kunu uttor nidile. Ako hutur. Hakar kori uthil Damayantiye. Hoy moi puti thoisu hosa kotha. Kintu ki pabi tat? Mangho pinda etahe pori ase? Pitambar Mahajane mur tuli sai kole. Mur khontan asil, moi mangho pindor tukurake sui sam. Moi mur ei dukhon hatere mur bongho dhorok sui sam. Here I brought the sound for Mahajan because there was a turmoil in his heart. And that heart, as if somebody is sparing the thing, digging his heart, removing his flesh. So this type of images comes to me very often, and they are very powerful motifs in my writing.
Indira records every bit of imagery in her own life, no matter how traumatic, and converts it to literary metaphor. Perhaps this is what V.S. Naipaul meant when he said, after he handed her the Bharatiya Gyanpith Award 2000, that every writer records his or her personal life for literary use. But Indira also brings with it, and in minutely sensuous detail, the geography, the history, and the religion of her land. Elaborating what she loves about Assam, she describes it as Jogulia Nodi Motia Pahar. It is a description in Assamese that evokes childhood memories of the land that nurtured her, memories which form the primary ingredients of her creative energy. She remembers, as if it were yesterday, the smells and tastes of her childhood. The elephant that her family owned, the mahout who took her on that elephant, the pungent smell of the opium that the mahout smoked, and even the taste of it.
তাৰ মুখলৈ মই বৰ হেঁপাহেৰে চাই আছিলোঁ কেতিয়াবা সি মোৰ মুখলৈ মূৰ তুলি চাইছিল তাৰপিছত অনুকম্পাত গদগদ হৈ গৈছিল খাবি নেকি মাইছানা মই তাৰ সেই বিচিত্ৰ চিলিমত হুপা মাৰিছিলোঁ কাহি কাহি অধ্যায় হোৱাৰ কথা মনত আছে হয় মই নিশ্চয় হুপা মাৰিছিলোঁ that was the first time I have tasted opium sitting almost in his lap. And the reaction was terrible. Probably, I was coughing whole half of the day. And my parents, when they have come to know about it, I had a crushing like into both myself and the mahout.
In later years, such childhood experiences got converted to literary motif. Indira Goswami is a writer out of residence. Ever since her stay in Vrindavan, she has lived in Delhi as an academic, first as a lecturer in Assamese at the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, then professor, and then the first lady head of department. Is this distance an advantage for a writer? After all, Indira wrote her classic novel, The Moth-Eaten Howdah of the Tusker, in Delhi.
I wrote this novel after 30 years, sitting in Delhi. Everybody was asking me, how is that you are here, even the Kamrupi dialect you have written so well, there is no mistake. I told them, see, the distance purifies one's feeling. And it happened to me. I could see every scene in such a transparent way that probably if I would have stayed there, probably I could not have written like that. The imagination played, imagination means mixed with truth, played a very strong part. And there is always an agony when you have separated from your very dear one there. And agony always, it is like an ornament in the language.
Lovers of literature are fortunate that the suggestion of the astrologer of Indira's childhood, that she be cut up and thrown into the Brahmaputra, was not actually carried out. As Indira's friend, Amrita Pritham, the great Punjabi novelist, once observed, perhaps this astrologer had seen just one half of Indira's birth chart. The other half was hidden until it was revealed by her literary talent.